welcome back to the newest episode of Aux Fiends. This is Rishabh here. I'm joined by my co-host, as always, Mateo. Mateo, say hi.
Hello. Glad to be back.
Back for another episode. Mateo, I'm surprised you recovered from Tylo already.
I know, I barely, but I think we're in for a treat this episode. So that's what kept me going.
Yep, and thanks again, listeners, for coming back to this new episode. And if you're a new listener, we usually start off by giving a little bit of an overview of what the show is overall. So if you're listening for the first time, Aux Fiends is a podcast where we do album reviews, except the gimmick here is that Mateo picks an album of his choice, and I pick an album of my choice every week, and we alternate. And safe to say, me and Mateo often have, let's just say, diverging tastes on albums.
No, that's
you've ever heard before. And sometimes we agree, sometimes we disagree. So I'm excited personally to find out, especially after having our last episode be almost 90 minutes, what happens on this episode. We'll be going to another fiending session where we'll be agreeing. So without further ado, Mateo, I just want to hand it off to you and get us into the album.
True. Right before we get into the album, because it pertains to not just this album, but any album we cover in every episode, I definitely recommend to any of the listeners to at least be familiar or, listen to whatever, album or even track by track. You can, pause the episode, go listen, just because we don't share the clips of the music. And so just have that familiarity and kind of know what we're talking about. I think it's definitely important to listen to the music as well.
Yep, absolutely.
Or listen to us. Yeah, or even listen to it after. But yeah, without further ado, you guys already know, this episode was my choice, Love Deluxe by Sade. So a little bit of history. This album came out on October 26th, 1992. It was Sade's fourth studio album. By then, they already had a really big hit, Smooth Operator, which you definitely were already familiar with, right, Rishabh?
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, and I'm sure a lot of the listeners were as well. Sade's a band from the UK. It started in 1982. The members on this album consist of Sade Adu, Paul Denman, Andrew Hale, and Stuart Matthewman. They also had two other members, but they weren't on this specific album. Also, I want to get this out of the way. It's not just their history, but my own. Don't hate, but for the longest time, I always thought Sade was just one person, just like the lead singer. And so actually researching and listening, I was actually kind of surprised to find out that they're a band.
Dude, I was the exact same. I know we usually have a segment where Mateo asked me what I, thought about the choice he's made, but I already had to jump in and say I always thought it was one person. Never knew it was a band, but that's really interesting to hear. Thanks for giving that context. Yep.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, but going back to kind of why Sade's important, straight out of Wikipedia, I'm reading this, but the band is credited with influencing the musical genre of neo soul and achieving success in the 1980s with songs that featured a sophisti-pop style, incorporating elements of soul, pop, smooth jazz, and quiet storm. This specific album, their kind of genres in this would be like R&B, cool jazz, a little bit of ambient genre, and art pop, with definitely some others. Specifically to me and kind of how I know Sade, honestly, I wasn't super familiar with them before, but I knew the MF Doom song because he samples, which we'll actually get into that later, because he samples a song off this album, as well as, maybe it's kind of cringy, but there's a manga series called JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, which they had. So I guess it's kind of a JoJo's reference where they take some characters and name them after musicians and artists and songs and such. But for myself, I really only knew like 3 of Sade's songs. It was really the hits, Smooth Operator, and then 2 songs off this album. And I kind of just picked it because I knew of their legacy, but I'd never really given a full dive in. And I had liked the sound before, even listening to this album, not to give any hints or anything. And so I thought it was going to be a really interesting listen, as well as to hear your thoughts as well, But to keep it quick, did you have, were you surprised? Any thoughts of when I shared this album? with you for
Yeah,
this choice?
no, I was definitely not surprised. I felt this album was going to be up your alley because I think, I had the same context with Sade as you did. I'd heard maybe one or two songs here and there. Obviously, everyone's heard Smooth Operator, so probably had limited context, but I definitely knew they operated in sort of a jazz R&B style. So, but it was interesting when you were giving out the history of so many different influences that are actually there. And in
Mhm.
retrospect, you can kind of really hear those. So it's kind of interesting. I really didn't know how much they'd influence until you just kind of read out that blurb, but it makes a lot of sense. So no, I was basically kind of on the same page as you in terms of knowledge on this band, and I mean, not even knowing they're a band, and but
Yeah.
I was not surprised. I definitely felt like it was something that you would pick and made sense at least at the time that you said it.
Okay. That's interesting. But we'll definitely leave any fiending or friending for the whole, album review and when we go track by track. But I think that leaves us with, let's just jump right in with the first track,
Yeah.
No
Yep.
Ordinary Love. Uh
Yep.
my album choice. Let me go first on this. Cuz
Hmm.
dude, silky smooth as hell. Let me come on. I felt like No Ordinary Love, it like built upon itself as the song kind of went on. I wasn't familiar with the song, but when it kind of hit the chorus, I was like, oh, okay. This is the classic part where this is No Ordinary Love. And I was like, okay,
Hmm.
I was a little familiar with at least that part.
Hmm.
Something interesting I did think though, this is the longest track off
Yeah.
the album at 7 minutes
Hmm.
and 20 seconds. Uh, I'll be honest, while I did like the song, I do think it was too long. I think it could have maybe been cut to half, and it even kept it honestly as a long song. Keep it like 5 minutes or something. But I think there was just a little bit
Hmm.
that Sade could have cut off overall from it and still kind of kept its integrity of this song. But overall, I thought it was a good start and pretty good opener to the album.
Nice. Yeah, no, I echo most of what you're saying here. I mean, I think it's an opener song, right? And I know we were saying this, I remember saying this even on the last album review. I think we get into the rut of sometimes calling the first track just a good opener. But I really think in the case of this album, that statement kind of stands. It really is an introduction to the type of sound that you'll be hearing. That being said, I mean, I agree with you. It's probably one of the weaker songs on the album to an extent, but it does
Mm-hmm.
introduce you to that lounge sound with the atmospheric, what you put more succinctly, I think, and more correctly as ambient sound, which kind
Yeah.
of trickles through the entire album. I mean, jazzy vocals, you get some rock undertones. You have electronic guitar as well, so that more jazzy sound for the guitar as well. And yeah, it's the first track on the album. It is like more than 7 minutes long. So I did feel that, structurally and lyrically, it felt a little bit more repetitive. And it kind of felt like it was still a little bit stuck in that early 90s, almost late 80s sound. So for me, this one's a good intro to the sounds you'll be hearing on the rest of the album, but definitely one of the weaker tracks for sure.
That that's definitely fair to say that it's one of the weaker tracks. And I do want to highlight something you said because to me, like how I said it was ambient kind of genre. When you said, and that resonated with you, when you said like lounge sound,
Yeah.
that really I really felt that. That really does make sense, not just for this song, but kind of for the whole album as a whole. And I think that we really do see just the glimpse of that, and then we kind of see it even stronger as the different tracks go on.
Yeah, I think Glimpse is right. I think the lounge sound, I think, is gonna, as I said, trickle throughout this entire album and take kind of different types of forms. But I mean, what do you think, Mateo? Do you always already want to kind of, I don't know, or don't want to jump too far into a label for this album, but I almost want to say it's kind of what we started calling a grandfather album to a lot of the different sounds that we hear today. I felt that at least even with the first track.
Yeah, I don't want to jump too far ahead, but
Yeah.
absolutely, I would agree with this is
Mhm.
definitely, I think, grandfather album. But I want to make sure that the listeners know as well. That's not like there's for me when I say that it's not even there's no connotations to that. It's a good thing. You know, at least
Yeah,
definitely
yeah,
with this album. This being a grandfather album, I think shows its kind of brightness. You know.
yeah. I think so. I think it shows that. I'll put it this way to put it a little bit more, I guess, conservatively, at least at this point in the review, is that I'll say that for me that means it really just means that it kind of influenced sounds that we hear today frequently.
Yeah, a
So,
very influential album.
yep, yep,
Yeah.
agreed.
Whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, you know, we'll
Yet
get
to
to
find
that.
out. Yet to find out.
Yet to find out. But I think it's safe to say we can go to the second track, Feel No
Yep.
Pain. Rishabh, what did you think?
Yeah, this was an interesting one. I mean, I know I've brought it up several times already, but I just can't help but feel it's interesting how this album choice comes right after our Tyler episode, because, and we were talking about grandfather album, talk about this track, right? It's kind of a rhythmic, funky, groovy, what we might consider a bouncy sound in today's musical landscape. Kind of a simple song, I'd say, Mateo, honestly, but still catchy, still retaining some of that atmospheric sound, a little bit, I think, tedious toward the end of the track, but to me, this feels like the most clearly kind of pop on the entire album, probably the most traditional song, honestly, on the entire album to an extent, in the sense that there's a very clearly defined chorus, there's a simple structure, um, but great use of drums, obviously, and you are automatically kind of invested in the sound of this track. Even when it begins, it draws you in. But for me, one of the more simple, I think, straightforward tracks on the album.
Yeah, I would definitely agree where it's definitely more simple. I mean, one of the things I had thought is honestly this felt more of like a filler song, though it's
Yeah,
definitely,
agreed.
but like in that though, it like had a good beat with the
Mm-hmm.
instrumentals and stuff. But it wasn't bad though. It was just kind of there a little bit. I
Mm-hmm.
completely agree though too. I even made up my own little genre, groovy blues. That's what I kind of thought
Yeah,
of
that's a
when I heard
good
this
term.
song. I won't lie. I think it's really interesting that you said pop because I not that I didn't hear that at first. I think I would have agreed, and maybe I just have too many connotations with like some bad pop because I don't think it's a bad
Yeah,
song, but
yeah,
even in myself when listening to this, because at first I didn't like it at first, and then it kind of grew on me, and then after listening to the whole album, I'm like, you know what, this was honestly going to be my least favorite song off the album, but then I gave it another listen. I'm like, wait, it's kind of growing back on. You know, I kind of like it, and I think it kind of resonates with you calling it pop because it was kind of catchy a little bit. At
yeah.
least it had grown on me. I definitely think it's the one of the weaker songs off the album,
Mm-hmm.
but and definitely kind of filler, but overall not terrible, not bad, not bad. It's safe to say.
Yeah, agreed. Not bad. I think I don't know if pop was the right term, but what I guess I meant by that is you have a very simple structure to the song, and there is kind of a
Yeah,
catchy chorus, kind of a repeating style to it, which I think is honestly quite different from the rest of the album and kind of stands apart in a sort of weaker way, I would say, right? Because I think
yeah,
it's not doing too much that's at the level I think that Sade is able to do. I'll keep it at that. But
yeah.
yeah, so for me, a little bit structurally simple and one of the more forgettable.
That's completely fair. There's the one part I would maybe disagree with, where how it's different than. Well, I guess you kind of saying it already. It's different, but to expand on that, on how it's kind of different, this is one of the two songs off the album where it wasn't just Sade's vocals. I swear there was the male backing vocals on the song. There's another song that has that as well.
Yeah, there
So
is.
I
Yeah.
kind of thought that was interesting because really for the whole album it kind of just plays off Sade's strengths, but
Mm-hmm.
this one had a little different. But
Yeah.
yeah,
And Mateo, you were saying Sade is the lead singer, basically, right? I just want
yeah,
to make sure I'm getting that right.
yeah,
Okay,
she
perfect.
is.
Perfect.
Yeah,
Yeah, that's super interesting. I honestly, that makes me want to research just each individual band member's, like, I guess, background, musical background, especially Sade's background musically, because I mean, there's so much interesting stuff in terms of sound in this album. But anyway, I don't want to get too far. I think safe to say to move. We can move to track three, Mateo. I couldn't love you more. Track three. You want to get us started?
yeah, yeah. Rashab, interlude already? maybe.
Really? I don't
Yeah,
know.
I
I
don't
don't
know.
know.
This I felt it was more down key, but it was still pretty good. Tone. I think a really interesting part of this song was I felt that tonally, Sade's vocals and the instrumentation match kind of perfectly.
Mhm.
Where I think that's something even off like the last album we reviewed, Tyler's album, where
Mhm.
sometimes musicians kind of do a clash with like their lyrics and vocals and instruments. You know what I mean? Where maybe
Mhm.
it's a sadder song, but it's more upbeat. Where I feel like this song, Sade kind of went all in on matching everything together and kind of keeping it more down key. And so I thought it was pretty nice to hear it all kind of in a cohesion. You know.
Right, right.
But
I mean,
what did you think?
yeah, yeah. For me, I feel this album really develops in an interesting way because I feel like tracks one and two, they're good. I mean, they definitely introduce a lot of the sound that you'll hear throughout the album, and they get you invested. But it's to me, tracks one and two are off this album are ones that you can really. This is gonna sound really bad, but you can play in the background, and then
Mhm.
slowly this album kind of draws you in an interesting way. And for me, track three is kind of the starting point of that. You start with some jazzy piano key changes. You start getting that combination of the R&B vocals. And really, the term that comes to mind with this track for me is just jazz. And you start really seeing that jazzy element develop in this album starting at track three. I don't think it comes to maturity in this particular track, but you start
Mhm.
hearing some of that saxophone, right, which we're going to hear a lot more of
Yeah.
throughout the next few tracks. But I think that theme starts getting introduced in this particular track. So I would still say it's one of the more forgettable ones. I don't remember a lot of specifics on this one, except that, you start really seeing that jazz theme really start coming up, starting with this track.
Yeah, I can give you that it's maybe a little more forgettable, but I do want to
Mhm.
push back a little bit on. I want to find out more what you mean by this is music that you can kind of have, or at least for maybe these first couple songs that you can kind of have in the background and kind of forget about. I know you
Yeah.
said later on it kind of changes, but to me, I agree and I disagree because I feel like honestly, even like my favorites off this album, I feel like yeah, you can kind of just put them in the background. But I feel a good kind of choice of like songs if it's going that way stylistically and it doesn't mess up right kind of the background like if you're putting it on for the background and it doesn't sound out of place to me that's working and it does what it's kind of supposed to do. I just
Yeah,
want
no,
to
I mean,
see if you're saying that more in a bad sense or not because I feel like it's good at least from what I've heard from this album, from the track so far. If we were just put in the background, it kind of, to me, they work as what they kind of were
yeah.
supposed to be.
Yeah, let me clarify. What I meant is I think the first track, No Ordinary Love, and the second track, Feel No Pain, those are kind of both tracks that feel like a jazz background score, right? I don't think there's anything a lot in those first two tracks only, I'm saying, where the instrumentation
Hmm.
causes you to really sit down and pay attention. I think starting from track three, and I mean this in a really good sense, it turns into something that's not just jazz in the background, it turns into something that feels more alive and spirited. I think starting at track three. I mean, that's kind of giving away some of my thoughts on the future tracks, but I
Okay.
really think starting from this track, you start noticing some of the musical flourishes in a more noticeable way, right? You start seeing these things become more salient on the album. And I think whereas first two tracks from me are quite weak, the third track is where Sade kind of comes into, I want to say, their own, and the vocals start coming into their own, and that jazz theme makes you actually want to sit up and kind of lean in and listen. Is I guess how I wanted to put it.
Okay. You know what? That's completely fair. You had a full
Yeah,
response to that. I'll give this to you. Yeah. You might
yeah,
even move me to that. Yeah. I think that's completely fair, Rashab. But,
yeah, and that's something I'll revisit again with some of the upcoming tracks. Right, this idea of I think now it becomes so accustomed to jazz being a really good background piece, and I don't get me wrong, obviously it fills the atmosphere very well, but starting from track 3 and moving onwards, I think there are some songs on here that make you actually want to listen far more actively, which I think is a really big feat, honestly. So I don't want to get too much into it, but let's go to track 4 and say if you're ready.
Yeah. Track 4, Like a Tattoo. Let me just jump right in. Classic. As soon as I hear that guitar, I mean, come on, man. It's instant. Like a Tattoo has great lyrics. I do think it's funny, though, that I like this song so much because it's kind of the opposite of stuff I like. This song's more of a speaky, singy kind of style of the song, if you know what I mean. But it's still very harmonious, and I think it was overall just a really good song. I mean, it's one of Sade's like top 3 like most popular songs, if we're being honest. I might even go out on a limb here and say that I think this song should have been the 7-minute song. I think this Like a Tattoo could have been longer, and I think it would have only just even gotten better. I want more Like a Tattoo.
Interesting. Okay.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I think when you started off this album review, you said smooth like butter, and I think that's pretty much the theme throughout. And I think this track really, I mean, I have it written down smooth and buttery. Like honestly, I mean, it just goes down so smoothly and so well. And you got this introduction of this acoustic sound as well, which I think we didn't hear very clearly in some of the previous tracks, but this introduction of that, even like, it's just a matter of going like, oh, Sade they can pull off an acoustic sound. They can pull off it sounds to me almost like a Spanish guitar at times, while, working with that lounge and jazz sound. And to me, this starts introducing this idea of, it's really going to sound funny, but this idea of cool jazz versus kind of warmer, brighter jazz. And to me, Sade is just pure cool jazz. If you really want to put it in those terms, it's so evocative, but it sounds like it goes off into the distance in a really nice way. I mean, it doesn't sound like it's necessarily, and I'm going to sound very, I guess, I want to get the words right, but it's not very warm and bright jazz every time. It's almost like this very cool and distant, stylized version of jazz, which I absolutely started to love, starting with tracks 3 and 4. And that honestly starts to only grow as we go through the album.
Yeah. I think it's really interesting that you kind of had that comparison of cool jazz to warm jazz. Because dude, no fiending. This is friending. I have it written down as well, starting on 4 in the 5th track of cool jazz. Like, I think you put it perfectly where it's kind of the jazz that kind of, that sonically it just goes off into the distance. Yeah. But it's not in a bad sense. It's just good. Where it's like you want it to kind of fill up every inch of the room,
Agreed. What I think is, and what differentiates it for me is, if you listen to some jazz artists, right, maybe someone with more knowledge on this can speak to it in the comments, but I feel like the warmer jazz sound is instrumentally a lot more, I guess, there's more instruments involved, right? You might have a sax
more busy.
Solo. It's busy. Perfect word for it. It's absolutely more instrumentally busy. And I think here, the production is so minimalist, but it still sounds so good because it's composed really well and smartly. It doesn't sound like, when I say it's going off into the distance, it doesn't go off into a whimper, right? It sticks with you still. So I think that in that way, I think it's really a grandfather album, because you think about so many artists who are kind of, and I can, take a bunch of names, but they're really trying to emulate this minimalist production even today. So I think in that sense, it's quite influential what Sade's doing here.
Yeah, and not to go on too much repeating ourselves, but it really is, I think you can really see the influentialness from really kind of like starting here. And I think that's something a lot of newer artists who are trying to kind of replicate that minimalist miss on, right? Where a lot of their stuff is okay. Like, I want that sound to drift off and go away. It's like, it's forgettable. But with, at least in Like a Tattoo, it's all, even with the minimalist of like the instruments and the vocals and stuff, it's like everything's important, no matter how hard it's being used.
Yeah. And to that point,
really important.
Yeah, and to that point, I think minimalism, especially musically, has that power to sometimes create intrigue and then slowly draw you in, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I think Sade kind of keeps that sound going throughout the album, where okay, maybe you don't have this busy jazz sound that we're all used to, but it's sort of maybe one instrument at a time, and then it grows and slowly draws you in a unique way. So uh, that's how I feel, especially with tracks 3 and 4. But going into track 5, Mateo, did that stick with you? Those ideas? Piece of
Definitely.
life.
Kiss of Life. I mean, another classic, Rishabh. The Kiss of Life is my favorite song off the album. Come on.
Okay.
I think it's so good. I feel like it feels like I'm in a college coffee shop in the '90s, dude. Like easily favorite. Super cool jazz. I think it has a absolute great mixture of genres. Kind of using the cool jazz and like the R&B, and I think it's really interesting too with what we've been saying on how it's kind of that using the minimalist stuff going away, but it feels so full, at least with Kiss of Life. It's really
You say that actually.
Strong song. Yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say because again, I think the cool jazz is the foundation for the entire album, but I'll say Kiss of Life felt a little bit warmer to me. If not in instruments, then at least in the tonality. I think it's a brighter song. I think I've heard this song before as well. I think there's a snippet of it or something. Still great, don't get me wrong. I think, you still have that sax and piano just sounding, absolutely fantastic. Especially, I think the audio engineering on this particular track really pops out. And this song really feels like a big highlight of the album where Sade is really going for it and showing the ability that they have as a band and that Sade herself has as a singer, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not disagreeing. I just think overall tonally it was a warmer song, but still like an interesting, engaging jazz song that I think it's so unique and interesting to listen to. And yeah, I totally agree. Not my favorite track, but
okay.
Yeah,
there's a couple of things I do want to hit. So just to be clear, maybe I'm a poser just going for Sade's hits. Like a Tattoo and Kiss of Life, neither of those are your favorite. Because those are definitely, Kiss of Life's my favorite, but those would be like in the top 3, off this album. Just to be clear, they're not.
They're not my favorite, no.
Okay. I'd be interested to see, when we get to it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But then another like little just interesting fact. This Kiss of Life is the MF Doom sample. He samples this song on Doomsday, which maybe that's also why the song kind of rubs off of me so much and why I kind of really like it, because I'm a huge MF Doom fan, and so you can if you're familiar with Doomsday, you can easily hear the samples of this, and then one other thing. You kind of touched on it. Maybe I was just thinking it of. I feel like if you are a listener unfamiliar with Sade, but their hits, I feel like you could easily say, okay, this is where the album's peaked, right? On the 4th and 5th track, right here on Kiss of Life, it's all downhill. It's downhill before, downhill after. But it's not to get too into the weeds of it, but I definitely would disagree on that thought. If you actually give the whole album a listen, I think there's a lot of good here, at least that we haven't even gotten to yet, and so it's really interesting with the popular songs maybe thinking that they're the peak, because they're really good. Obviously it's my favorite song, but this ain't it. This ain't all Sade has. There's more to come, I guess I could say.
There is more to come, definitely more to come, but I do think I think track 5 is a must listen. I think track 4 is a must listen. I think track 3 is also kind of a must listen, because really these are, I think honestly tracks 1 and 2 I'm just feeling weak on, but 3 to 5 I feel really strongly that anyone looking for intro to Sade must listen to these 3 tracks for sure, if not a few more on this album.
Very fair, very fair. Speaking of a few more on the album, Rishabh, 6-track, Cherish the Day. 6 tracks, Cherish the Day. But will I cherish this song, Mateo? The answer is yes. I will cherish this song because it's my favorite off the album. Whoa.
I know.
Really?
And
Okay.
yes, and let me defend it because I feel strongly about this one. First of all, I think this to me, I think exemplifies, in my opinion, what the sound of cool jazz sounds like with Sade. You start with a really dissonant sound in the beginning, right? It's not harmonic or anything at all. It's very
Yeah.
cool and distant. And then you get this kind of lush ambient sound that kind of underscores the entire track. And I think this one is around 5 minutes. I'm going to say 5 minutes 30, 5 minutes 50, something around that time.
Yeah, it's
But
5 minutes 30.
but in my opinion, Mateo, this track is an amazing example of what Sade is able to do, well, how much they are able to do with so little. Because you have this very minimalist production, but it still has a deep layered texture to it, I think. There's hypnoticness to it, there's a rhythm to it as well. And it still sounds very hyper stylized and deep and restrained in a way. But it just sounded so great to me how stylish it sounds, how like absolutely like cool it sounds. I want to say, I know I'm using that word over and over, but it just sounds so, yeah, just so cool. I mean, it has that smoky, almost like distant sound to it, which I really enjoyed. I just love this track. I got really excited while listening to it.
Wow. Okay. There's like so much to say.
So
You
much to
kept saying
unpack.
so much to unpack. No, being honest, there is. Going off of exactly what you were saying of you trying to find another word for like the cool jazz. I have this written down. Though I stole it, I took it straight from Genius. It's a very airy song. I don't know if you can agree on that. I
Yeah,
think you would.
agreed.
It's a very
Yeah, I think
airy
so.
song.
Yes.
I really do like how the song opens. And in this, you really see how the instruments kind of take a break a little more and let Sade's vocal shine.
Mm-hmm.
But I think it was too long. I'll be honest, it was tough to say. It was kind of boring, if I'm being honest. This is another where I'm like, maybe this is kind of like an interlude a little bit.
Okay.
But and this is why it's called Aux Fiends. This is my least favorite. It was really tough to say because I don't think it's terrible, but this is my least favorite.
Okay.
And I'm not just saying that because it was your
get it.
favorite.
Yeah, I know, of course. I mean,
It just didn't.
but I see it. I mean, like the thing is, this one is to an extent, it's kind of almost like a trance-like sound to an extent, right? And I can totally see with the length of this track, it's I don't know, like I was saying, 5 minutes something, right? More than 5 minutes long, and I can definitely see someone getting tired of this one. And I think its simplicity is also its duality, right? I think for some people, the simpleness of this song, where it's really just this ambient sound to an extent driving the song, it might seem repetitive or reductive to some people, whereas I found it to be just I don't know, somehow I just got caught up in the trance of this song. And believe it or not, Mateo, I was getting another lesson before we even started recording. So that's how much I'm vouching for this. But I don't feel like fiending because I really feel that this is one of those divisive tracks that I could easily see just dividing people.
I think that is fair because again, it's not terrible. To me, it was just kind of boring. That's why.
No, that's fair. Mm-hmm.
That's why I had to put it as my least favorite. But I can respect your opinion on it being and why you really liked it.
Yeah.
But not to stick on that too long. The seventh track, Pearls. If you don't mind me jumping right in, I think this was the most, to me, different song so far. I mean, you kind of had like Feel No Pain sound different, but it sounded different in a different way. To me, this sounded bigger, like almost orchestral.
Yeah, of course, definitely.
This song straight up just sounds big. And I think it's really interesting because it's something on Aux Fiends we kind of talk a lot about, and how a lot of artists kind of try to sound loud or bigger, and they usually belt out and scream. But Sade can kind of just keep her whole kind of cadence and sound, and she still sounds so loud. I don't know if that's just the mixing or what, but she just sounds. Her voice takes up a lot of space in a really good way. Disregarding the Hallelujah part where she really did go all out, and I love that.
Yeah.
But again, Pearls was like, it was like a movie to me. I don't know. I think it had really thoughtful and strong lyrics. I don't know if you were paying attention to them too much.
Yeah, I was. Yep.
But this is an absolute song I would recommend to listen to, and also have the lyrics up, because it's kind of, I don't know, it's I think it's a really just important song. It's the song about kind of like, is about like two kind of people and women out there that like suffer, and kind of how Sade herself, kind of feels for them and such. And I think it's just a really important song that's also just good.
Yeah, no, 100% agree. I mean, it is a fantastic track. I mean, it is tough, honestly, to almost want to put this as my favorite, but I personally, I just like Cherish the Day that much. But such a fantastic track, honestly. Yeah, I mean, even when you were just kind of describing it, I just was thinking back to how great this track is. Like, definitely starts with a warm orchestral sound. I think, again, one of the more tonally warm but lyrically dark songs off this entire album. It's an emotive for sure. Sade's vocals, man. I mean, seriously, I got goosebumps listening to this. Such a touching song. Some of the lyrics are so perceptive and unique, and I absolutely love that one line where it says, "She lives a life she didn't choose, and it hurts like brand new shoes." Sounds almost like a nursery rhyme, but when you hear it in the context of this song, oh my god, it hits totally different, right? And honestly, like that Hallelujah, like one or two lines. I mean, when Sade just belts those notes, and there's something about her doing that style of singing performance that gives this song so much more weight, because so much of the other tracks and her style of singing is so airy and lightweight that when she hits those two notes, you really feel the power and emotion of this. So definitely a very emotionally charged song from Sade, which I definitely did not expect, especially coming off of Cherish the Day, which is this cold, like not cold, but this distant kind of jazzy sound coming straight into this orchestral powerhouse. Like I just can't wait to go back and listen to this one on stage.
Yeah, just 100%. Honestly, yeah, big agrees. Again, we really, because I never even knew. I think we both agree Sade had a song like this, or I never even heard the song. So I'm assuming maybe if you're not familiar with Sade, you probably also never heard Pearl. So definitely big Aux Fiends recommendation.
Certified recommendation, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it's pretty rare when both of us agree this strongly on any track, any particular track. So I think this one should get an award or something, but definitely one of the most, I think, hearty recommendations I've heard on our podcast.
Yeah. And again, it's not just, I can't say this enough, it's not just the like how it sounds, it's also the lyrics that go into it.
The lyrics,
and it's the contrast of like her talking about these things, how she feels about them, but then how she feels about them herself, and how she feels
absolutely
women out there. And so I just good all around.
Yeah, and I like that you use the term important, because I mean, not just lyrically but musically, this track is important to listen to, just in terms of composition and the way it's structured and the way it's been created. I think is and even where it's been placed in the album, right? It's such a contrast to everything else that it immediately catches your attention. So it's definite listen.
Yeah. I think that it's safe to say we don't got to pump it up anymore. Listeners know to check it out. But to move on to the 8th track, Bulletproof Soul. Rishabh, thoughts?
I think this is my least favorite. I'm between this and the first track, honestly. I still don't think I have a good answer to which one I dislike more. Maybe just out of sheer spite that the fact that this comes after two of my favorite tracks of the album, and the fact that tracks 3 to 5 are so good, whereas track 1 is kind of like, okay, we're getting situated with the sound. I think track 8's a bit more of a letdown, I would say. There is a little bit more, I felt, like an R&B focus in the vocals here. Of course, there's, like you were mentioning, I think this is the one with the male backing vocals that you can hear more clearly. To me, this feels like Sade running on autopilot a little bit. It's more of a standard. Some good moments, of course. I think Sade, even at their worst, is still some of the best,
Yeah.
So, to me, a little bit weaker, so I'll just say this one's the worst. But it was a difficult choice, I would say, to pick one that I really strongly felt is the worst. But between this, I would say tough competition amongst this track and the first two tracks. I guess I'll put it that way.
Okay, I think it's really not to say, I guess, interesting that you said Sade's going on autopilot, because while maybe you're convincing me that I don't like the song as much as I do, because I don't think it's the worst song, but the autopilot, not even to get into that yet, the autopilot part of what you said, because one of the first things I heard was like, oh, this sounds like a tattoo. This Bulletproof Soul sounds like one of their other songs, but definitely I like this one less. But I don't know, this song still kind of hit for me. It still
works for you.
It still works for me. Like I was like, I almost want to swim in this song if I could, in this in a soulful.
This is the one you want to swim in? Are you sure?
I don't know. It worked. It worked. It worked for me. But
there's one track which I'm sorry to interrupt with you. I have to just say this, but there's one track I was in the water with, and we'll get there obviously. But
that's not leaving too much to the audience. But no, I would swim in this one. Other than the other one that you're obviously talking about. I will say maybe because on the listen, I would have said this is a top 3 song for me. Now I definitely wouldn't. This is, to me, it's middle ground, because I think absolute top 3s would be Pearls, Kiss of Life, and Like a Tattoo.
Okay.
But I don't know. It's just like, it still just sonically worked for me. And maybe I'm just, a Sade head, and I'm, just going for what they know they can do, because, they're on their quote autopilot.
Yeah.
But it worked. But honestly, even thinking now, I'm like, okay, maybe this is a little forgettable. When I'm trying to think of the song, I'm just thinking of Like a Tattoo. So I think that might be rubbing off a little bit. So I'll give you a little grace. I don't think it's the worst.
Well, I'm still upset that you think Cherish the Day is the worst, but
you will just disagree. We're going to disagree on that. That's Cherish the Day. You got to cherish that. But
yeah, no, I mean, like, to an extent, like, Bulletproof Soul is not the worst song in the world, obviously. Like I'm saying, I think, coming from us Sade heads here, like, I think to an extent, even when they're at their worst, they're still at.
It's like pizza. The Sade is like pizza. Yeah. Even bad pizza is still, food is still good.
There you go. You got the description box now for the episode, Mateo. Sade's like a pizza.
Yep, Sade's like pizza. But yeah.
All right. Well, if you have nothing else to share on that one, Mateo, I'm gonna just say it's time to dive in, splash in, swim in.
Oh my gosh!
To the next track.
Get it all out the way, Rishabh. I know you've been dying to do that kind of stuff for the track intros. Dive in, let's swim. Sounding fishy over here. What is this?
It is sounding a little fishy, because I think the ambient sound has been there throughout this album. But then you get to track 9, Mermaid, which is, as far as I remember, are there vocals in this video? I can't quite remember.
No, it's all instrumental.
Yeah, it's all instrumental. Okay, perfect. Yeah, so, I mean, this one, if you come out of this not feeling like you're a dolphin or a mermaid or a sea turtle or something, I think Sade has failed, or honestly, you have failed. Because this song is the most aquamarine, this thing should be used in every, I think, TikTok that's related to like aqua aesthetic or whatever it's called, because it's just, I was drowning in water with this one, because it has such a strong water island tropical feel, completely sensory track, definitely, I think, a big grandfather to the types of genres we've discussed so often. I think, honestly, I want to say vaporwave, Mateo, but I'll leave it to you since you're the vaporwave expert. But I mean, this is what I call a water track.
Water track. Okay. Dude, so much to unpack, which is really interesting because, I mean, on Aux Fiends, we've covered just, non-lyrical albums, just pure instrumental. But on this track, being the only one of it, I think there's so much to say. But I don't even know where to unpack. All I can say, I guess, this is where I will start it. You heard it here heard it here first, folks. Rishabh said you failed, you did wrong if you don't feel like a dolphin, basically. And I kind of agree. But like, just to clear up your end, Rishabh, did it work for you? Did you like this? I don't even know if I could tell. I think you did.
Yeah, I liked it. I liked it a lot, actually. I think it was so confident in what it was doing and so well executed that I honestly, it's funny because some of the sounds of this track were still playing in my head even after I kind of finished listening to the album, because it wasn't catchy. Obviously, it's like a catchy pop song. It's a full sensory atmospheric song, but it's so immersed in that, and it still has that 90s aesthetic to it, which I also kind of liked. Very nostalgic to an extent, when you think about, you talk so much about mall music, like this is that mall aesthetic that's so popular on the internet. And, to me, this is like the ultimate 90s aquamarine aesthetic.
Honestly, now that you're talking about it, I actually would agree. I feel like, though I can't think of anything off the top of my head of a Sade song being sampled into like vaporwave and such, I can't believe I didn't think of that on my own. It really does make sense to me, though, that this would be a kind of a grandfather for, the ambient genres, but then also just like vaporwave, because that really kind of stemmed out of that as well. And the whole other track on this album was, sampled, and that's a huge part of vaporwave. So I think not just even on Mermaid, but I think Sade, you definitely can see in that newer genre of vaporwave of kind of being the grandfather of it. But to stick on Mermaid as a track, honestly, I thought it went crazy smooth, but it still had that like grit to it that I really liked. I was super tempted to say this is an interlude, but honestly, no. It is what it is. It's a closer. I think it's a good closer, and I'm cool with that. Being honest, I did hear a mix of. It's interesting too, because while it's called Mermaid, I didn't immediately go to watery, swimming, dolphins, turtles. Though I do resonate with that now. I instantly thought of like the Twin Peaks opening song, and kind of a little bit of like that Bob Ross kind of jazz.
Okay.
If that hits with you at all.
No, it does, because I think there's that 90s sound to it too. Yeah. Go ahead.
I think it's super 90s. One thing I do wonder is why they didn't have any vocals on this. Because I could completely see how Sade's vocals would have fit in too. Yeah. If you get what I mean. Like it sounded like they just took her parts off. It still worked 100%. But I feel like it could have worked even more. Maybe they tried and it didn't work out. But also as a closer, I think it's kind of nice to like have that little breather at the end of it.
Yeah.
With just pure instrumental. And maybe it's just my thoughts too much of like, okay, I wanted to see how Sade's vocals would have fit in like mid listen, because I even started imagining Sade singing or like kind of humming like at the back of my mind to Mermaid.
Yeah, but that's just a big compliment, I think, to the song and to the album at large. Is you want more out of it, which I think is a big compliment in my opinion. But the genius, I think, is, even though that's what we want, I think the fact that Mermaid is as it is an instrumental track is a great stroke of brilliance, I think, because of course you could add in the vocals, but I think the way it differentiates itself then makes this one interesting.
I agree. Yeah. And definitely on that point of that, you kind of, I think a lot of things in life, not just even music, are it's better to want more than go on too long. And I think, not to dive too much into the album review, because that's what's kind of up next, is I think Sade kind of hit that perfect of, okay, I wanted a little more, but I don't think it went on too long. There's nothing immediately where I can say, okay, this entire song was filler. Like even this worked at what it was supposed to be doing. The closer, giving me a little sense to breathe, take everything I just listened to in, and
great
sitting with it. And so it worked. 100% worked with me.
Agreed.
Rishabh, I think it's time we can jump in to the album review. Do you want to go first on this?
Yeah, I can start. Well, first of all, I think this has been probably one of our most, I guess, what's the word I'm looking for? Most positive, I guess, album reviews
Yeah.
to date. I think, this is one album I think that we've agreed on pretty strongly. And the last one I can think of that we agreed on very strongly was, and go back and listen to the episodes, everyone, Maria Tchaikovskaya's album, where I think
Yeah.
we went crazy for that album. I think safe to say, at least for me, I'm not crazy. I don't think Mateo is like crazy. Maybe, of course, crazy being a relative term, but I think extremely enthusiastic. Right? I mean, this album is absolutely fantastic from my
Yeah.
perspective. When you can tell, I think throughout the entire review, even when we're talking about songs that were a little bit on the weaker side, there's still this feeling that, even when Sade's operating at their worst, overall it's fantastic. And I think
Yeah.
the confidence of the sound, the fact that it uses jazz and ambiance and that lounge sound so confidently, and then at the same time you have this warm orchestral sound that can come up. You have acoustic guitar that comes in. You have something like Mermaid that can kind of catch you off guard. You have an R&B kind of side to it as well. Such a multi-dimensional album while still being stylistically so cogent and coherent. I mean, I absolutely thoroughly enjoyed listening to Love Deluxe, and it draws you in slowly.
Yeah.
I think the first two tracks, like I said, um, I was listening. I wasn't really feeling it. Honestly, I was thinking I was going to be quite mid-range about the overall album.
Oh.
But as you dive into the tracks, you really start getting drawn in slowly. I think that's the brilliance of Sade in this particular album. And yeah, I mean, I just want to say I think this is one of the few albums I think that we've reviewed where after listening, I was still thinking about it to an extent. And personally, I was thinking about, how in my own creative projects and spaces, I can draw inspiration from the sounds and style of this album. So I think for me, that's a really big, I think, thing to say about
Yeah.
any album is how influential it was for me as a listening experience and how I'm still thinking about it and discussing it. I think there's something to discuss with this album. I think this is why we make this podcast. Is for albums like this that are layered and have this a real musical sensibility to them. So I don't know, Mateo, how I can sound more positive or enthusiastic, but I wanna hear your
I mean,
full album review before I go my rating.
yeah, yeah. Well, Rishabh, I mean, I don't think I've ever heard this much praise for like an album in a long time. I'm serious. Even for the Maria album, Kiss Me, like
Yeah.
you said some big things for this, and it really does fill my heart. I'm like the reverse Grinch right now. It's growing 3 sizes with this on my own pick. Rishabh, you said all these things.
I know, isn't it
I'm
amazing?
touched. I'm touched. But
I know.
so you want to save your rating for after my review, just to be
I
clear.
mean, we can do the rating now. I mean, I think for me, right now I'm at an 8 out of 10. I could go
Eight
9,
out
but
of
I
10.
really feel strongly that I'm at an 8. I think 10 out of 10 would be like absolute. I'm still waiting for that album. I think in my life, I don't know if it'll ever get made, but maybe someday we'll come across an album like that. But
Okay.
I think 8 is a very strong rating. I think a few things here and there, like the first two tracks being a little weak, not going too crazy on Bulletproof Soul, Kiss of Life. Also, I think it's good, maybe slightly lukewarm, but overall, I feel like a strong, solid hate with a heavy recommend. So
Okay.
I think
Okay.
8 is a strong rating coming for me.
I'll take that 8, and maybe with what I say, maybe it'll go up. I don't know. Maybe it'll go down. I don't think so, but
Okay.
maybe it'll stay the same. But for my own thoughts on the album, I mean, wow, Love Deluxe, really good. I'll say it,
Mm-hmm.
staple of the '90s. Like it had
Yeah.
there's songs of love, introspection, and like
Mm-hmm.
inequality.
Yeah.
If you had to pick an album per decade to define the decade, I honestly think this would be up there to define the '90s. Like it's just good, and I think it really defines kind of a whole multiple genres and a whole side of like how society acted and felt and what they listened to in the '90s. So it overall just like worked. It was like
Mm-hmm.
the whole album also it goes about song like longing for love. It's like a love kind of album in a way. There's the longing
Love
for love.
Deluxe.
There's Love Deluxe. There's longing for love, being in love, and there's like unrequited love.
Yeah.
It was just good. But like there's the one song, kind of main, kind of tonally different one, which was like Pearl, I guess you could say, if you go by the lyrics, not necessarily about love, but it was kind of different. There was also Feel No Pain as well, a little bit. I thought it was interesting that these songs worked, being what they are kind of compared to is like other songs of nature as well. You know what I mean? Where it's like, I feel like a lot of days there's music kind of about like real life problems, not to say political or such. But I think those two songs worked in that nature, talking about it like a specific problem. And I think it worked not just because the way it was written, but it was also, they were just like good songs to go with it as well, I think. And maybe I'm going to retract this, because I originally thought and said, okay, you don't, as the listener, you don't need to listen to this whole album. But there's just a lot of good, and I think it does work together. Even if you do listen to the album
together.
Yeah. Even if you or not a fan of Sade, not a fan of these genres and such, I would absolutely say it's not a waste though to listen. Even if it's out of your genre wheelhouse. I will absolutely say though, and I think you might agree, there are required listening songs on this.
Definitely.
On this album. With Like a Tattoo, Kiss of Life, Pearls, hell, even throw Mermaid in there, I think is really good. Just like overall, good. It had the beautiful vocals, instruments, lyricism, all in unison. Super strong album, if I'm being honest. And for a 90s album, I'm going to give it a 9 for 90s out of 10.
I hope that's not the only reason you're giving it a 9.
No, I'm not.
I
think it's just a good. I feel like I'm, just repeating myself, just saying it's a good album. I think it's a really strong album, and you see the confidence of the band in this, and they know what they're doing, and they have their sound, and
they have their sound.
Super big kind of grandfather album. If you listen to this and then you just listen to like any music from the past 20 years, you're like, okay, this is where it kind of took from that. This is where it kind of took from this. I think it's super important. Just songs and album as a whole.
Yeah, no, fantastic. I think this is probably one of our most highly rated episodes. I have to go back and check to confirm, Mateo, but I think we usually, if we check those average ratings, I think between the both of us, this is probably one of the top albums.
I think it would definitely be around top 3. I think Discovery and probably Kiss Me were both very close in our ratings.
Yeah.
Being honest. Yeah. And
and I think this is one where you picked, and I think this is probably the one with the highest rating for me for a pick from you, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah, I think I do think is the first, because for Discovery we both agreed on that.
We both agreed.
So I think I'm glad that it was it's finally my time to shine with my pick that you also really enjoyed.
Great pick, Mateo, and I think great pick. Yeah, good job.
Yeah. Rishabh, anything else to say about this?
No, I think before we go into the last part of the show, I think obviously. I think this is why we say, if you can, then to go back and ideally listen to these albums before you come into the episode. I mean, obviously, if this inspires you now to listen to the entire thing, that's great. But I think these conversations that me and Mateo are having, are really enriched if you go back and before listening to the episode, really dive into the album. Because I think that the tough thing about doing a music podcast, at least for us, we don't have decades of experience behind us reviewing albums. We really want to go in track by track and give you an analysis, but I think that comes alive when you listen to the track yourself, I guess. For me, this album is the ultimate example of please go listen to this album and then listen to this discussion. Either listen back if you've reached at this point, or just I guess just all I can say is encourage you to listen to this one and listen to the albums before you come into the episode.
Yeah, I can do nothing but push up what Rishabh had said. Yeah, go listen to the album and then come back to us, or do it the other way around. But it's you get nothing but benefits, I think.
Yeah,
listen to
agree.
This especially
Agreed.
this album. But yeah, Rishabh, I think it's safe to say though, without further ado, I think we go on to your choice for next album pick, Rishabh.
Yes, we can. Well, Mateo, you had such a great pick this time around that I wanted to, I guess, to an extent, return the favor and pick something which I feel strongly that I might know where you might land. And I know we've discussed this particular artist before between ourselves as well. And the reason I wanted to pick this particular artist is I think something about listening to this album and the fact that we were referring to it as a grandfather album to so many different artists today made me want to pick one of the artists that this album reminded me of. And this is also just happens to be, I guess, the band that I'm listening to right now, like 24/7. I think I've just been listening to this band probably, I think for the last, I want to say like 8 to 10 months. That's how passionately I feel right now. So this album is really going to be a pulse check on what Rishabh's listening to now outside of this podcast, which let's see how it lands. It's an album that I think is going to resonate with people who enjoy Sade, because I think there are some stylistic similarities. There are definitely some stylistic differences, but we'll get into that in the next episode. So with all that being said, Mateo, we've talked about this artist off the mic. My pick is Cinema by the Marias.
Rishabh, as soon as you started saying pulse check or what you've been listening to, I knew it was going to be the Marias. I knew it. I'm not surprised after what you've been saying. All I can say is I'm interested and excited because I know a couple Maria songs, definitely not as much as a listener as you.
Thing. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I think this will be good. I think this will be a good listen.
Yeah. I mean, I don't want to make the Sade comparison sound very legitimate. I think that they are different sounds, different albums. But somehow it just felt like a right transition to go into that album after listening to Sade. So that's what I stuck with.
I think that's fair. I obviously this is stuff for the next episode, but I don't know if I super see the Sade comparison, at least from the songs I know the Maria's about. To me, they're more indie.
Mm-hmm.
But I guess we'll see. We'll see. I definitely don't think this is definitely no curveball from you. I don't think.
Yeah.
So I'm not the biggest fan. I'm just familiar with the Marias.
Yeah.
I think it'll definitely be an interesting discussion, and I'm interested to see what your ears have been listening to all this time. So dive a little bit into Rishabh's mind. I think that'll be
Rishabh's headspace. Yeah. It should be fun. Well, I think that wraps up this episode, which I think is, again, I think this episode is one for the books because of how high the ratings were. So thanks everyone for listening. I hope that this inspires you to check out the album and check out all of our other episodes. Y'all, I'm going to say it, that Tyla episode needs more love. Go check it out. It's 90 minutes long, but we deep dive into one of the current pop figure, one of our current generation's biggest pop figures as of right now. As of this current Billboard chart. Just to, amplify what Rishabh says. Not just Tyla. Listen to subscribe, comment below, listen to all the stuff we've put out. So I think we got some interesting stuff going, and be excited for our next episode. Hopefully, we'll keep up this tune of giving it out weekly or a little over a week or whatever. But all I can say is thank you, Craig. Thank you, Rishabh. Thank you to the listeners for listening. Thanks, everyone.